Hello and welcome to a new episode of The Wrap. Today we are super excited because we have Anna Holmqvist with us. She is the Chief People Officer at Motatos. Anna, welcome to The Wrap.
Thank you very much. Super happy to be here.
So what is it? Is it Motatos or Motatos?
I think that is a question that never will be answered.
Cool. No, really happy to have you on board, Anna. We are up for a real treat today. Today we'll be talking about how you can improve TA productivity and also how you can create impact when hiring slows down. I think a lot of our listeners are in that phase now where the market isn't as crazy as it was back in the heyday. So how do you really create the impact from a TA or recruitment point of view when hiring is not top of the agenda or in the management team? So cool. Let's get going. First question. When you first joined Motatos, what did the TA function look like? Tell us sort of more about when you came in and what you sort of first saw, and I assume you were ready to get your hands dirty and start working.
Absolutely. So that was about 2.5 years ago. It was just after the war in Ukraine had started. So the world started to be a little more shaky. But I think as an e-com player, we were still on that high from COVID, right?
Yeah.
So we had massive growth plans. When I got in, I had you build a TA team. We took in employee branding specialist and really built the people function for skill. Super fun, but a lot of also focus internally. Okay, what kind of team do you want? How do we want to brand the people function? And then I think the world changed super quick. So I think in the end of the year, this was 2022 then, the investor climate changed super rapidly. And I think the journey towards profitability was needed to be fast forward really quickly. So it was a year of going from here to here. And I think for us, that meant the business challenges changed. And so we changed the people function. And that was, of course, super tough. We had to say goodbye to super talented and committed people. But I also, in hindsight, looking back, I think it forced us to become closer to the business. It forced us to break out any silos in the people team. And I think when you start building, you have we're going to have a TA function, then we have an HR operation function, then you have business partners, and you set up those instead of looking at those connections. So I think where we landed was of course we need deep expertise in all of these areas, but we also need a team that can be that T competence, right? That can also okay, I know people operations, but I can also hook into hiring and I can also hook into engagement. So I think the team got super efficient, and when you're forced, you have to really find what makes the difference and focus on that. So it made something for the team in the end as well. So I think that I can really see that shift of having a team where of course you stand in your expertise, but you're also willing to explore and be part of other people-related topics.
I assume that also was something that was happening across the whole organization that were affected by this. So more T-shaped oriented profiles coming into the business, or at least forcing people to think broader. Which role did you play as the CHRO in especially the communication maybe around how do you turn this around, because it's a culture shift, it's a mindset shift?
Absolutely. I think We have been a super successful, super fast growing company. So we came from the environment where like everything is possible. We just go forward and think about the consequences later. So it was for sure like, okay, now we can't add anything. We have to optimize what we have. So I think we went through, organizational changes, where I think it was really me and the CEO who was in the front line of this. But I think the trick is to really, first go back and say, what are we going to do? Like, what's the task what's the problem to be solved? And then you start deciding, okay, we saw that the classic, we had the global versus the local. It took a lot of energy. Who has the mandate to decide? Okay, can we fix that? With another organizational decide, for example. Or we had a big management team where all the functions were represented, meaning also it slowed us down because there were too many people. So it's like, okay, can we do a smaller core management team who can actually take decisions faster about the strategic initiatives and then have other decisions forum closer to the business? Okay, how do we fix that?
That's super interesting. I'll just stop you there, Anna, because this is super interesting. But how did you manage to communicate that? Because as people don't always celebrate change, and if they're not involved in decisions that they previously were involved in, how was sort of breaking that news or trying to find alternative forums for them to make or have an impact on the company? So yeah, super excited, or not excited, super curious to understand how you solved that one.
Yeah, it was tough, I have to say. Like, as you said, like it was a big change, and I think it affected a lot of people who had never gone through this kind of business transformation before. We are a pretty transparent company. We're small, so I think what we did was try to just tell it like it is. But it was tough. I think we lost a couple of super talented people that was part of the beginning of the journey, and then was no longer interested in the next chapter. And I think that's also like, that has to be okay, even if it's sad. But we tried to talk a lot. I think that was one of the key. I think what we could have done better is talk more to the leaders. To have them through this, they were also in the front seats. I think we were quick and we wanted to be there, we wanted to be transparent, but this is one thing that I would have done different. I would have involved the managers earlier to help them have a bigger context and that help do the change.
Because usually they're the messenger, but then you like the context and the reasoning to be able to...
Exactly.
That is it's a fascinating journey, and I think we've also been through parts of that as well. And it's always difficult to sort of see what to do and what not to do and try to understand. But usually it's always better on the other side of that change. So with that said, where do you stand now? Are you on the other side of that sort of transformation now? Or are you in the midst of it?
I would say that we now have like an organizational structure that feels really good, that actually we could also prove to the organization it has solved a lot of these issues. It has become clearer who has the mandate and who takes decisions over what. So I think that's also important communication-wise. Like, if you say you're going to do something with a purpose, that you actually can go back and say, was it right or wrong? And so, but I think the mindset is still transforming. Like how, probably most scale-ups are in that now we are supposed to grow and be profitable at the same time. And that's not too easy. So I think from a people perspective, it's a lot of how can we enable everyone to, reach their full potential, really? How can we make things as simple as possible? How can we dare to say no to things? How can we be okay with, offering a lower level of service because we need to focus on something else? So I think that is still something that we work with all the time.
Yeah. And I think you're onto something very, very interesting there. And I think that's something we've also tried to advocate is with I don't know, fewer specific or specialized functions in the organization. You have the opportunity to be more T-shaped. You get more broader perspective. You have the opportunity to take lead on projects where back in the days it might be a person that was responsible for this project. So I think that there are always good and bad aspects of this. So yeah, interesting.
Totally agree.
Yeah, interesting to hear that we share some thoughts there.
Yeah.
And back to the people function. So okay, you were blitz scaling or scaling super fast, and that slows down. So what type of conversations did you have then with the recruiters in the organization, or did you then just build the full stack HR people internally? Like what did the organization look like after that shock?
No, but what we did was actually to merge the TA role with the business partner role. So we have now roles that focusing on, like, I'm the business partner to the organization, but I also have the TA responsibility. And I think that has worked really well. I think one thing, it's easy to, like, when you know that we were supposed to recruit 50 people next year, we're down to 5. You kind of feel like, then we don't need TA, right?
Yeah.
But I think that's really to fool yourself, because once you, like, things will always happen. Like, people will quit, so you will still have that recruitment need. And I think it becomes maybe even more important when you only get to recruit a few people, that you find those T-shaped people, or people who wants to be T-shaped, or who wants to take a lot of responsibility. So I think sometimes on the up and down, like, okay, I hired 5 TAs, or no, I have to let go of them. But I think, like, TA is a crucial part of the business regardless.
I see a lot of companies now cutting TA people, and I think it's somewhat short term. But it's understandable with the climate that you see. Yeah. You could also bring in an embedded partner, not to do any commercial activities in this call.
But for sure. But I think, like, you will need that competence regardless if you have it in-house or you go through a partner. I think it's easy to fool yourself to say, like, oh, we're not going to recruit, so we don't need it, because it will be recruitment.
Yeah, I agree. And going in, then you went in when the market was hot, and then life happened, things changed. Assume then you needed to shift. It was focused on T-shaped profiles and the hiring or the people roadmap. How did that change in that sort of moving from blitz hiring to what else? So what did you focus on? What was the core focus after the change?
Yeah, no, but I think it's back to that optimization. So we're really like, okay, we need to max out what we have, like the talents we have, the teams we have. We have to max them out. How can we help doing that? So I think it was everything from building a foundation that it's the smoothest one. Like, how can we onboard people the fastest? How can we make sure it's not like admin heavy processes? How can we optimize and utilize that? Maybe I think what we did was also to really focus on, like, leadership development and growth for the people. Like, how can we make sure that when they are here, they really max out their potential? So I think that was a big shift in us. Instead of, like, looking always to the things to add, like, how do we optimize what we have? But I still think it's important to, when you create new solutions, to think, still have that skill mindset. Because we will grow, we are growing, we will probably, the world will change again. So when we create a solution, it has to be something that can scale. So we don't do, like, an activity that's only here and now, and then we can't use it again. So I think it's still important to build that skill mindset in the things that you create.
how do you measure the effects of that? The measures you took when trying to, I don't know, improve leadership skills within the organization. How do you measure the actions made by or the projects in HR to focus on that?
Yeah, good question. I think what we try to do is to have a little bit of almost like a product organization mindset, to think about, okay, who's our users and what the products is that we deliver to them, and do they like them or can we twist them?
Yeah.
So we have tried a lot tonight, sit down with leaders, talk a lot to the organization, talk a lot to employees, and try to have that, like the little things, like we test this one. 50% worked, 50 didn't. Like we build a leadership community where we had we gathered everyone and had super good days together, and then we had this idea that they're going to meet in small lab groups and work together. It didn't work.
No.
No one met. Okay, then we have to pivot again.
Yeah.
So they won't invest the time. We have to do something else. So then we thought, okay, we do digital. How do we do that? So I think that test and fail fast mindset really goes good for HR as well.
Bit like people as a product. I don't know if you read Jessica Swan. Yeah. Cool. We had her actually as the first guest on this podcast. Yeah, she's great. And if we look at your people operations today or people team, how big is the team?
So we have 5 people working with HR and we're people focused. Because we also have our own warehouse, so we have that kind of environment to work in as well, and support 5 markets. And I think I also thought a lot about this before joining, about the TA competence. And even if we don't do now 10 hires a week, really use the TA competence in other areas.
Yeah.
So I think the TA competence we have used a lot for building the architecture, because this is people who are super good at defining competences and looking at the offer and looking at career development. So I think also that TA competence is not recruitment. It's so much more, and I think you can use that in building the people blocks.
Yeah, looking forward now, what type of friction do you have? What do you see in the organization that you're sort of ready to take on? Which challenges do you want to fix tomorrow?
I think, to maybe be a bit boring, I think the leadership is key in this rapid change. So I think how can we equip our leaders a lot? And I think where I am a lot is really go back to basic. We can learn so much, but it's also lies in the simple things, how do we have a conversation with our employees? How do we give feedback? How do we coach? So I think this will continue to be one topic. And then I think my biggest challenge is probably career development. When you are a smaller company, not growing. I think before we could we're opening a new market. You go there and do whatever you want. There were so many opportunities. And now, there's not so many new roles we can build. So I think this is the struggle now. We have super talented, ambitious people. Of course, they might move on in their career. So I think this is one of the things where I try to spend some thought time on. And I think to your point earlier, there are so many upsides also being a small company. It's hey, you work with marketing in Finland and you're the only one. There's no one else. And there's something great about that. But of course, we have to also have in mind that maybe you want to move up, you want a new title, you want a responsibility that's on the paper that you can feel. And now it's harder to provide that.
Do you also think that's a generation thing? In a way, I think I've talked to a lot of people leaders lately, and it seems like they're they're seeing a bit more like generation gaps in terms of expectations and a bit of what's next culture or what's in it to for me, which is good. Like good to have ambitious people, but at the same time, there's a difference between like progressing into a new role versus mastering your current role. So, yeah, I don't know if you have any reflections on that.
I don't know. Sometimes I feel like it's easy to say that.
Yeah.
But maybe it's also about like where you are in your career. I have hypothesis that it's like the earlier you are in career, it's important to feel that like this was really a step. I think when you have more experience, maybe you choose like it's not what's on paper or that everyone can see that I move on. It's rather that I work on the stuff I think it's fun or where I think I'm good or so maybe I feel it's more connected to that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, but I think it's a challenge for a smaller company for sure.
Yeah. I don't know. I want to get into your brain or head, Anna, and try to understand like what's when you come in on Monday or leave on Friday, and you're reviewing your people metrics, if you have any. What are those or metrics you view in the CHRO world? What defines the success in your role?
If we look at people data, I don't think it doesn't give us too much to follow that in a weekly basis because we're a small company. So I was like, okay, one person left. Like, what does that tell us? But we do look a lot of on talent numbers, I think. We try to follow that trend. Like who's leaving, who's joining, how long does people stay, how long do we have people who we don't keep or don't want to stay after their probation, how many work more than 4 years, how did they progress internally. So I think these are the numbers that helps us the most. And also like how do we look into diversity when it comes to management or managers or the total population. So I think these are the numbers that we follow most closely.
You don't necessarily have like a specific target, it's more monitoring and seeing trends in the data. Is that
exactly? We discussed this a lot. Like should we have targets? But we said we don't really, it's not super clear what would be the best for us. So I think now at least we're in the stage where we follow the trend.
Yeah.
Like what kind of discussion does that spark?
Yeah, makes sense. So the team now operates on more OKR basis in a way where you're together, you look at friction points or pain points in the organization, you build the OKRs as a group, you do the prioritization, you view the talent metrics, but not necessarily have specific targets for those metrics. And then the team is operating on a T-shaped system. So you have more cross-functional competence within each HR rep. Is that the right analysis? Yeah.
Very good surprise.
Good. Yeah. No, but it's an interesting setup, and I think it seems motivating to be on your team because that you get at least the impact and the possibility to work in a broad role, and also you get the opportunity to prioritize as a group and work together on like pushing the needle. So then I assume that people work in more of an ambidextrous way, pun intended with our name Ambi, but meaning that they focus on the strategic OKR project, but at the same time keeping the lights on project, so that it might be challenging working on the sort of long lens, short lens perspective.
I think we all like, the reality hits and it can be like a week where you plan to work on now we want to look into how do we recruit to our warehouse, for example. Like it's a big project. Like how can we do that more digitalized and so on? And maybe you plan to do that for a week and then that week gets stolen of like operational tasks. So I think this is a hard balance. And I think especially for HR, like it's so it's hard to own your calendar, right? Because it happens so much and you have, do you have 5 minutes? And that becomes 15 minutes and then it becomes 15 tasks. So I think this is something that we struggle with for sure. But I think also to have that structure around goals helps. It's also something that we've written it down, and if it doesn't make sense anymore, we take it away.
Yeah.
So I think if I compare to before we worked like this, it was more, you start this project and then it's like, what happened with that?
Yeah.
Like we start did we finish it? Was it good? Now I think we take more decisions about okay, we're not going to do this anymore, or we push it to the next period. And that is a really good feeling, I think.
Good. You make a conscious decision on topics rather than just sort of life happens. Yeah. It's a good point. What type of pushback are you getting from the executive team on people topics? As a CHRO, that's a classic sort of topic when I talk to people leaders on standing their ground, defending the department, putting people on top of the agenda. So how do you push that story, and what type of challenges do you have working with the executive team?
Something for you. First thing to put in say, I think this is a great company to work with people in, because it's I have such a natural seat at the table. I work super close with the CEO, and that's such a benefit when you work with people, I think.
Fantastic.
But what I think the classic is when it comes to talent, I think we often prioritize speed. We know that we have a very good process that's aligned with our strategy when it comes to, inclusion, or what we want to act on the business need, and then we want someone tomorrow.
Yeah.
Speed okay. So I think this is one of the balance where I try to balance and challenge, but sometimes it's just whoa, okay, you hired someone. Classic. Then I think this has also been, most companies. It's I really believe that you have to have some sort of process around, performance and development. And here I think each leader have their own idea on how to do it. And you have to have a process that you can have your space and create your own dialogue with your employees, but you still need something to track how we as company progress. And sometimes we have to push people a little bit to actually write down those goals and have those tough conversations or give feedback and so on. But I think this is something where a lot of people have a lot of opinions. How many times a year should you have it? Should we have, are we going to the 9 box, or are we doing calibrations or not? So it's something I think trying to find this magic bullet that will solve every problem. That one is hard.
Yeah, it is. And with hiring now, in terms of volume, what are you looking at this year? How many people do you think you will hire this year?
Who knows? Now, I think we still have new ground that we're going to break that will allow us to add a little bit more talent. But I think we will more grow with a couple of roles, and then also maybe focus more on growing people internally and really figuring out that okay, if you step into this role, how can we efficiently do the things that you do today? Can we skip them? Can we do them smarter so that you can move into the next step? I think this will be the way to go. So I think also, how can we optimize more to give people more space to do more things? But then again, the world outside maybe changes, and
who knows what
we stand in front of new opportunities.
Yeah. I was a bit curious about when you go from super scaling into more conservative hiring, and then the hiring managers and the organization get a bit sort of rusty when it comes to recruitment in a way, and they go solo and do their go back to old habits. So how do you sort of govern the recruitment process, and how do you ensure that, I don't know, your head of sales is not going solo and doing his own or her own thing? So how do you control that?
Yeah, I think that helps a little bit that we now have this combined role with HRBP and TA in the same, because then the same person is super close to the manager. So they also are on top of like, okay, now we're going to do hire. I know your team. I know your challenges. I can kind of guide you into this. I think that helps. I think what we try to do is also always connect, like, why do we have this process? Okay, we committed to this inclusion and diversity goal. This is why we have it. Or, you know that you only get to hire one person. You need 3. Can we think smart about this? This is what the process helps about. So I think we try to be really out there. But I think that combination that it's not like you work with TA and we only meet when you recruit. But you're there every day as a business partner. I think that helps us.
To have small spice in the organization to follow up. Jokes aside, it's good to have that trusted advisor and build that relationship, know the department, being able to understand what matches the team. Given the times we live in, you can't sort of listen to a podcast without the AI being part of that the topic. Sure. So you mentioned that you need people to be more efficient, like get more shit done without like adding more people. So how do you utilize technology and AI to make people more productive? And how much is that driven by the employee themselves versus you putting tech and software into their day-to-day?
Yeah, I think maybe speaking mostly from the people function, I think we actually did, when I joined, I did invest in good digital tools. And that was super important for me. So I think we have that foundation to make things, user-friendly, simple, easy, and also saved us a lot of time to go away from the spreadsheet. When it comes to AI, I think we're probably progressing as most. We're not there yet where we have like a super outspoken strategy. Now we have a lot of like good people that kind of tests and work with it. So it's on the agenda, but we could push it a little bit more to say like, these are the area where we're actually going to be on top of it. As a people function, I think we're better and better on using it to just like write stuff. If you look in the recruitment process, I think that helps a lot. We're not using it for selection. We're testing it a little bit, but I think we still are hands-on in the selection part, but we do use it a lot in like the communication.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's what I see the most, that people use it for job descriptions, for content and employer branding.
Great. Do you guys use AI in the recruitment process?
We try to use it, especially like top of funnel, building the story and pitching pitch decks, etc. to candidates. But we're testing, but controlled testing in a way, because there's a buzz out there, so you need to like really make sure that you screen away what's not adding value, because like we need to be respectful of candidates, and there are a lot of cool AI tools out there that have turned to be bias traps in a way, so you need to sort of stay away from those as well. So I think I would say we're monitoring it. We're testing some tools that seems good, but we're also we're selective when it comes to the assessment part of it. So if we look back at your time, these 2+ years now, what are those sort of things that you would not do again? That sort of your, I don't know, failures or things that you wouldn't recommend people to do.
I think one of them is, I see it as a pretty classic HR. We just produce a lot of stuff. We do so many good things, so many good activities, instead of really knowing why we're doing it. And especially, I think, when you build, like, okay, I come here and I want to build a performance process. I want to build a leadership program. I want to do this, and it's all good. But like, you have to kind of feel the organization. I remember we did this huge culture project. It was so good, but it was so exhausting for the organization. And it ended up being like 100-page report.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah.
Like, it's still lying there. Like, I don't really know, like, have you leveraged maybe 50% of it?
Yeah.
So I think, again, you know, stepping back, doing that product mindset, like what's the minimum value product that we can test and then scale from? I think that is one of the things. And then I think when it comes to change, we talked a little bit about it before, but maybe also try to keep that long-term focus. We did a lot of things in a short period of time, and it was tough for the organization to absorb.
Yeah. Oh, it's a good point. I think in our organization we've also been very specific about the outcomes versus outputs.
Yeah.
Because with growth and with extra people want to do their best, so they produce a lot of great stuff. But if it's not used, then it's just maybe creating more friction than benefit. So I think that's super valuable for companies. I don't know. I think as an HR leader, you need to go through one cycle of it. You need to experience it first. You can talk about it and advocate it, but like you need to learn the hard way. But hopefully people will stop before it goes crazy and bananas.
Yeah. I think we have defined a couple of these are successful behaviors, and one of them we have is kill your darlings, which I really like. Like it's okay to test, but you also have to be humble enough to say when it's like, okay, it didn't work, that's okay, but we're not going to do it anymore. Leave.
Yeah, makes sense. Oh, that's it's a good point. You have people in your people team. So what makes a good HR BP or a people partner in your eyes? We have a lot of HR BPs and recruiters and TA people listening to this podcast. So in your eyes, what's a world-class HR BP in your view?
Yeah, I think for me, it has always been, when I worked in that role as well, is to like, what do I need to know and who do I need to get to know to get that feeling that I'm actually part of the team. Like I share also their goals. Like I'm successful when that team reach their goals. And if that is that you spend time with them and get to know them and actually build true relationships, I think there's a lot in understanding what the team actually does. Like for real, like maybe sit with them, understand like what are the daily tasks, who are they collaborating with, what collaboration doesn't work. So I don't think there's like a shortcut to it, but I think that willing and interesting to actually feel like a part of the team is the key for me. Then I think it helps like in the beginning, and again, going back to this, like when you have this mixed role, I think recruitment is a really good way of building that trust with the manager, because it's so concrete, like the support you give. I think that helps us a little bit to do.
Good. Oh, but that's good. So to use the product phrase or the commercial phrase is more of a recruitment is a sales enablement tool.
Yeah. Oh, very true.
To build a connection.
Yeah.
No, but really appreciate your input, and I think a lot of the listeners are much smarter now listening to this episode and getting an idea of what it is to be a CHRO in turbulent times and try to build maybe the HR organization in the future. Maybe who knows what tomorrow brings, but I definitely see the benefits of being more realistic and being more ROI driven and MVP driven, as you've mentioned. So food for thought. But thank you again for joining the wrap up. I really appreciate it.
Me too. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening. Remember to like and subscribe. We're coming out with a new episode every single month.